Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me today for the THI Postscript Podcast is our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. Andrew, long night for you last night. Obviously, you were up there in Charlottesville for Carolina's 44-41 loss to Virginia. Carolina falling to 4-2 on the year. Both of those losses coming to teams that had one win going into the game and that also had some really, really struggling offenses before they played Carolina at least. So, AJ, first thing I want to talk about, let's just reflect on what happened a little bit. I guess now you've got a little bit time to digest it a little bit more, watch the game film over a little bit. What's just kind of your overall thoughts on how things played out last night in Charlottesville?
Well, it didn't look any better for Carolina the second time around.
No.
You know, when you cover a game, I'm really busy doing, multitasking. I'm taking my notes. I'm tweeting. I have a notepad where I chart things. I chart big plays, runs and passes of 10 or more yards and certain other little sequences I keep track of. And as you've seen me do, the 5 takeaways, by late in the third quarter, there's like 17 of them.
Yeah.
And you got to whittle it down.
Yeah, true.
And at UVA, in the press box, it's an open-air press box. So they sort of have a PA announcer for the press box like everybody else does, but he only said a few things and you can't hear it.
No.
And then with nobody in the stands, everything the official said was like caraming off the metal aluminum stands and all that kind of stuff. So I was texting you guys saying, what did the refs say? What did the refs say? Because you just couldn't understand. And Greg Barnes and C.L. Brown, Adam Smith, but we were just trying to figure out collectively, okay, what was that penalty?
Yeah,
who was that on? And then we'd look up to the TV and they would often show the guy that had the penalty. So I'm saying this because I really needed, after driving all night and having system problems with rivals and all that kind of stuff, to sit down and go through a few parts of the game on the tape before doing this postscript. And it didn't look any better for Carolina on tape. And I haven't watched all of it. There are only certain sequences. But certainly it looked bad in person in some parts. It looked bad on film. And they certainly have quite a few things that must be addressed, that must improve in order for this team to move forward. I think the program's okay. I know that we'll hit on this a little later in the postscript. That splashing sound you hear, people jumping off the cliff all over the place. So they kind of dial it back and whittle in a few minutes. But this is a football team that has a lot of work to do. That's basically what my take is. And we'll zero in on a few things here in the next few minutes. But it didn't look any better this morning than it did last night in person.
Absolutely. I mean, I know watching it on TV, for me, it just wasn't a good performance, especially from the defensive side of the ball. I mean, you consider Carolina scores 41 points to a Virginia team that enters the game at 1-4. I mean, if you would have said that Carolina was going to score 41 points before the game started, you probably would have guessed that Carolina was going to end up winning that game. AJ, you were doing the PFF grades this morning. I know that defensively, Carolina as a whole didn't grade out very well. I mean, Virginia had 210 rushing yards, 418 total yards on offense. So just not a good night for Carolina, especially on that defensive side of the ball from start to finish.
Yeah, I'm not completely married to the PFF numbers. I've asked coaches the last regime, and I haven't really talked much to this one about it, but I'm sure they're all the same. They do their own grading, but I'm sure they look at PFF. I know that Larry Fedora, he said he did. Coach Cap said that they did, but they didn't hitch their wagon to it or anything like that. So I don't either, but it is sort of a starting point. It is a bit of a measure of how things went. And the reality is, and when I do our PFF, like the nitty-gritty for offense and nitty-gritty for defense, I cut it off at 60.0 or above for grades. I don't put anybody that's graded below that, just above that. You could kind of figure it out, or you can subscribe to the service and see what those other ratings are. Well, Carolina had 7 stars in defense that graded out below 60 last night. That's not good.
Nope.
And a few of them were below 50, and a couple of their players they really need to play well have been way below 50 a few times this year, and they've been in games like Virginia Tech and Florida State and last night when the team has really struggled on that side of the ball. So the Tar Heels did not grade out well on that end. On the other side, Virginia had 14 guys on offense that played 10 or more snaps that graded out at 60 or above. So you do the math, and that pretty much sums it up right there. And I know that Carolina had more offensive yardage than Virginia did, but, I mean, when I watched that game, it's when things happen. Just the 6 penalties, but when did they occur? You know, they had these other mistakes, but when did they occur? And how damaging were the mistakes? All the special teams mistakes were hugely damaging. So not a great performance at all by the defense, and we're going to lead into special teams here in a few minutes, Jacob. But those PFF numbers, I don't think lie last night.
No, I don't think so either, AJ. A couple things in the second half in particular that were a little bit questionable, I guess you could say, are just bad plays by Carolina as a whole. There was a kickoff when it was 44-41. It looked like Jonathan Kidd was trying to do maybe a squib kick, a pooch kick, and it ends up going out of bounds. You know, Virginia gets great field position. That ends up hurting Carolina. And then later in the game with the fake punt, you look at that, how that proceeded. Mac Brown said after the game that Carolina as a team expected Virginia to do the fake punt. But if you look at the personnel that was lined up on the field at the time, I mean, you had a guy like Stephen Gosnell plugging the hole for the quarterback to run through. It kind of makes you question, well, did they really expect that it was going to happen when you look at the guys that were out there? So those 2 plays in particular, AJ, I think were big plays that, you know, ended up affecting the Carolina. And there were late game plays that, you know, maybe if something happens different there, we might be having a totally different conversation right now.
Well, I asked Mac after the game about the fake punt and what Carolina's defensive call was on that. And if you go back and watch the replay, you can see that UVA doesn't really – they kind of stay on the field. Now, Armstrong had gone down a couple of plays earlier, hurt. So they had the backup in there, 99, who played a lot during the course of the game. They do a lot of direct snaps to him, and they use his multi-QB sets. He's the guy out there. And if you go back to the punt that Toe Groves dropped, which was their previous punt, I believe, to that point, 99 wasn't in punt protection. And you got to wonder, okay, he's now the quarterback. You're not going to put your quarterback in punt protection, but there he was lined up in punt protection. And it just didn't look like Carolina really kind of saw that.
No.
And I don't know if they did. We'll ask Mac on Monday about him, get a little bit more clarification. They did make a play, but the runner was able to get the first down. It was a 4th and 3 or 4th and 4 on that situation. But you could see Carolina's defense going out the field and the special teams coming on. And it just didn't look like they were totally ready for what was about to happen. I'll watch it again. We'll get probably more explanation from Mac on Monday. And the reason that this is important, in my opinion, is because it's just a continuation of every little area of special teams is something's going wrong. And even Jonathan Kim, who's been fantastic kicking off, getting mostly touchbacks, the squib kick didn't work.
No.
So when you think about it, well, if you're going to kick the ball out of bounds and give them the ball at the 35, I'll just try an onside kick because they might get the 40, 45. It's not going to be that much difference as far as where they get the ball. So that was a tough stretch. And that kickoff that you referenced was the beginning of the drive that ended with that fake punt.
Yeah, exactly. Let's stay on special teams for a little bit more. It's Javon DeWitt was obviously brought in during the offseason. It seems like as a whole right now through 6 games, to me, and I think you'd agree with this too, and I think most people would, seems like the special teams is, if anything, gotten worse than they were last year. They've cost Carolina in a number of games, i.e. Florida State is a perfect example of that. What do you make of where the special teams is at right now? And, I mean, how do you get out of that? I mean, is there a way to just kind of flip the switch from being very average to, you know, bad at times at special teams to, you know, just being consistently okay? I mean, how do you fix that?
Well, that's a really good question. And I'm planning on asking Mac about that because I'd like to write something this week because, you know, I'd like to know where is that line where, okay, these things are very correctable. Maybe some things aren't as correctable because it's young personnel. I'm not really sure. So we'll ask and we'll find out what he has to say about that. Special teams can be awfully damaging. I don't know if it cost them the game last night. I don't know if it cost them the FSU game. But when Mac said that that the defense had a problem with sudden change, where they get off the field and all of a sudden, boom, they're right back on the field because of an offensive turnover or a special teams blunder. And we've seen that in the last 2 road games with 2 block punts at FSU and then the botched punt return last night.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to look on the field and say, okay, this is how you fix this and that, because so much of it is refinement and so much of it is skill, so much of it is timing, so much of it is being in sync. So I'm just curious how you improve that during the course of a season. If it's personnel, maybe you get some older players out there, or if it's just working it and grinding it, just like being a writer. I mean, you know, my stuff's better now than it was 20 years ago because I've practiced it.
Exactly.
So is it something as simple as that? It's a good question, and it's certainly a question that every Carolina fan is asking right now, and not just Carolina fans. I've had a few colleagues say, what is up with the special teams with North Carolina? I'm like, well, that's a good question. I mean, they're not effective right now. I mean, even Jonathan Kim had been kicking so well and then had the squib kick there. I guess right now, you know, Drew Little and his snaps are pretty good.
Yeah, it's about
it. And I'm not trying to be funny. They haven't allowed a huge return yet. So other than that, something has gone wrong in every part of the special teams. It needs fixing.
It does. It does, AJ. Before I let you go, looking forward, like I mentioned earlier, Carolina 4-2 overall now, 2 losses to 2 teams that I guess before the season started and going into the games, when you look at their records, games you probably didn't expect Carolina to lose. Where does this team go from here? Obviously, got a couple rivalry games coming up, and you know some tough games to end the year as well. So, where do you think this team goes from here now, AJ?
That's a good question. I think, you know, the high-end Carolina, as I've said, and we talked about last night when I was in Charlottesville, the high-end Carolina is really good.
Yeah, they are.
The low-end Carolina's not. And they've kind of passed each other in the same night quite a few times. Last night was one of them. Sam was incredible.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yami was outstanding. You know, there were a few other guys that played well, had moments, but they have the potential to win the rest of the games on their schedule.
They do.
They also have the potential to lose the rest of them except Western Carolina. Now, they're not going to lose the rest of them. I think they'll play well against Duke. We've seen them respond to poor performances.
Yeah, we have.
Mac is so good at getting kids focused. He's so good at putting this performance to bed and turning the nose in the right direction. And that's something that he has to coach a lot because the program is not fully mature yet because they're just 19 games in. And a lot of the kids that are out there are ones that have lost a lot of games in Chapel Hill. So he's still coaching that. He's still coaching culture. It's not something – they're not at the point where the older kids are passing it down to the younger kids like you see in great programs. I'm sure you see it in Alabama. We see it in Carolina basketball. I've seen it in Duke basketball. I'm sure Ohio State's that way, even though they've had changes at the helm there. The culture is still the culture. You look at Florida State, look at that, you see what happens when the culture dies. And it's got to be rebuilt. Mac is trying to build that culture. So however they play the rest of the season, Sunday's practice is extremely important in that respect because you've got to learn from all that didn't go right. But you can't force a square peg into a round hole. I don't think anybody should expect this defensive line to be stout and to shut people down every week.
No.
They had a really good game against NC State. It's going to happen. They played, but they're not going to do that every week. They struggled last night. They struggled with running quarterbacks. Linebackers are maybe not playing to the level that people thought that they would, and there are other factors. It's just not, hey, Chaz is not playing at the level he did a year ago. There are other factors involved.
Yeah. And
understanding how 11 guys in the field, they can all affect each other and affect appearance of performance is important. So for this team, it's kind of cliche, but got to get back to the drawing board and got to get back out to practice and fix things. But I really think that, you know, for me as a guy who covers the team, you know, getting an idea of how they fix the special teams mistakes, because you can have those other mistakes, but boy, when the special teams, it shifts the game's course immediately.
It does, yeah.
And they have not handled that stuff very well. You know, they gave up the touchdown last night after Toe Grose's fumble, after the block punt at Tallahassee, first play, 23-yard touchdown. Even the Michael Carter fair catch fiasco at Boston College, they started their own 5. 2 plays later, Sam had a tip pass interception. couple plays after that, BC scored a touchdown.
Yeah.
So they haven't handled these sudden change situations well, and they need to learn to. But you minimize the sudden change situations without having problems in special teams.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not going to be able to fix everything overnight, but special teams obviously is being addressed, and it'll be interesting to see if there are changes, what the changes are, and if they can improve it. If they can improve considerably in special teams over the next 5 games, that'll be huge launching into next season.
Absolutely.
But right now, that's a big if because something creeps up every week, Jacob.
Oh, no. It's weird game last night again, AJ. Like I said, it was a game I didn't expect. I expected it to be a tight one, but overall, I didn't expect it to go down the way it did. And, just not a good performance.
And let me add something else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, let me add something else, too. And I know a lot of people that are watching this and listening to this, if they've seen our message board or saw our Twitter feed, a lot of angry fans.
Oh, yeah.
People gotta pump the brakes a little bit. I know that people might say, gee, you're kind of making excuses. It's just 19 games. But it is just 19 games.
Yes, it is.
I mean, this is a very young program under this. And it's really easy to have 20/20 vision when you're looking back. It's really easy to say, well, that play to Daz at the end of the first half was a bad play call. Well, because it didn't work. Mm-hmm. But if Daz gets that thing and darts into the end zone, people aren't saying it's a bad play call. It wasn't executed as well as it could be. Maybe they could have run something else, maybe throw it to the end zone. I don't know. But I think people need to pump the brakes a little bit. This is just 19 games in. They're 11-7. As I said last night, every Carolina fan would take the first 19 games if they were asked. If they were presented the option 14 months ago, okay, you get this, what you've seen, or you get something secret behind curtain number 2. Nobody would have picked curtain number 2.
No.
So let it play itself out. You should have all the faith in the world in your head coach. He's a Hall of Famer for a reason. So much is going right in this program, but a lot needs fixing for this team. Mm-hmm. And if they fix it, it bodes the program moving forward. So I think people need to pump the brakes. I get that they're upset. I get it. But the Fire Longo stuff is just kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, I did
41 points. It ain't his fault.
Yeah, I did see my fair share of bring on basketball season tweets last night, which is I think is a huge overreaction for a lot of Carolina fans. But like you said, I can understand.
It's emotion.
Yeah, and
it's emotion.
I get it. Mm-hmm, I do. So, I have my.
And you know what? I bet you Mac Brown wouldn't be all that concerned by it because it shows that people care.
Exactly.
It matters. Mm-hmm. Look, there were a couple years there before he arrived, and there have been some other years in the past, but a couple years before he arrived where when they're melting down on the field during a game and Twitter's not melting down anymore.
Yeah.
It didn't matter as much to people. So when people are upset and they post to fire this guy and fire that guy post on our message board and they tweet it to us all the time, it means it matters to them. Exactly. And that right in and of itself is an example of what is done with this program. It matters more to people. They've got that want and care back to a level where you would like to see it be in every fan base all the time, but when you're apathetic, it's not going to be there as much. So we get it. Mm-hmm. Care, keep caring, and have faith. I do think that you should have an open-minded view of the big picture here, and things are certainly headed in the right direction, even though it didn't look like it at times last night. Yeah,
definitely not. Definitely not. Carolina dropping to 4-2 last night, losing to Virginia up in Charlottesville, 44-41. That's going to do it for us. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones on the THI Postscript Podcast. Thank you guys for tuning in. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like it. Be sure to share it. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.